Okay, now we are going to talk about basics of Data Vault. Data Vault model consists of three basic entity types: hubs, links, and satellites. To simply define, the hub represents the core business concepts such as customer, vendor, sale, or product. They are the containers for unique business keys. And links represent the relationship between several hubs and sometimes other links. It includes the unique combination of the business keys. And satellite contains descriptive historical data associated with the hubs and links. And what is business key? First, get an understanding about it. A business key is something that business uses to track, locate, and identify the information. So if they say, let's find the address of customer X, so which key we need to search for this customer, and how do we find information about them? Or we may tell the student got the highest grades in the exam and which student we are talking about. So we need a key to identify each entity uniquely, like customer ID, student ID, or product code. Business keys, also known as natural keys, and they're supposed to have meaning to the business and they are independent from the operational systems. In earlier sessions, couple of times we used business keys as primary key in our scenarios, like customer ID or product ID or store ID. But can we just assume that the business key is always equal to primary key? The answer is simply not all the time. Because primary keys are sometimes system-generated surrogate keys and has not any meaning to business. So remember from earlier examples, in customer table, each record is uniquely identified by customer ID and it also has meaning from the business perspective. If I would like to search customer name, I will simply use the customer ID as identifier. Therefore, customer ID is the primary key and as well as the business key in here. But when we look at the second table, we track the historical changes about the customer. Therefore, we use the slowly changing dimension type 2 table in here. So customer Jim Black moved from corporate retail group and result of it, the customer ID is replicated. So it means that customer ID is not primary key anymore. So we need a surrogate key column as SID in order to identify each record uniquely instead of customer ID. So we may notice in here, our surrogate key column became the primary key. But we know that the surrogate key does not have any business meaning or identified customer. For example, in here the customer ID 100 already have two surrogate keys assigned. So in both tables, our business key is customer ID, but in first table, business key, which is the customer ID, is equal to primary key. But in the second table, surrogate key, that is SID column, equal to primary key. Therefore, assumption of if business key is always equal to primary key is not valid every time. And how we are going to identify the business key? So there are multiple strategies, and first step is we can look at the database and see if the table has a unique index. And if there is not any unique indexes, we should also have to talk with the business or query the data directly to find the unique sets of columns. Okay, let's jump back to where we left off. So we briefly explained the hub, link, and satellites, but look at the real scenario and understand how we will split the fields from traditional tables to these entities. So we have two source tables in here, student and faculty. So there is a one-to-many relationship between them. So a student can study only one faculty, for example in engineering or social sciences, but a faculty can be registered by multiple students. First, we will identify the business keys. So as we have the two entities in here, faculty and student, we expect also to have two business keys. So of course in the real projects it needs to be checked or confirmed, but in here we can simply assume that student code and faculty ID are the unique identifiers and business keys of these entities. So these columns will be included in the separate hub tables. Then we have descriptive attributes for both student and faculty as student name, email, gender, or faculty description, address, phone, and we know that these fields are separated out to satellite tables. And finally, foreign key columns are one of the practical identifiers to recognize the relationships and set up the link table. So faculty ID shows that we are going to create a link table by using this primary key foreign key relationship. So as we get general understanding how we structure these tables, we can go a little bit further and detail these entities. Okay, first look at the hub tables. Each hub has exactly the following columns: primary key, business key, load date, and record source. Primary key is a sequence identifier, generally a number generated from a database. So until Data Warehouse 2.0, primary key was a standard integer surrogate keys. But one of the innovations in Data Vault 2.0 was the replacement of the surrogate keys with the hash-based primary keys. And this primary key is a calculated field which is the hash value of the business key column. So using the hash keys allows us to deploy our solution in distributed platforms, so basically in Hadoop systems. Because the Hadoop systems do not have the surrogate key generations like a modern relational database management system, it was only possible to use these platforms with the innovation of the hash keys in the 2.0 Data Vault. Then we have the business keys, and we have already discussed about them. So the next one is the load date. It is generally a date and time recording when the key itself first arrived in the data warehouse. So the load date tells us the first time the data warehouse knew about that business key. So no matter how many loads you run, this field is created the first time and never dropped and updated. So the last one is the record source, tells us which source system the data came from. It can be SAP, ERP, or any sales system, so it provides the traceability for every record back to the source system. And on the other hand, if we combine a common data from different source systems, for example, we have customer ID coming from both SAP and DB2, and we would like to integrate them into the same hub. In this scenario, if we have a customer exists in both systems, and how we will define the source system for this record? In here, the important aspect is which system feed the data first, because when source system defined for a specific record, it cannot be updated later. So these are the main elements of hub entity, but before moving to example, I just want to mention shortly about what hash value means. We will handle this topic detailed later, but to get a general idea, hashing is the process of converting a given key into another value. A hash function is used to generate the new value according to a mathematical algorithm. The result of a hash function is known as a hash value or simply a hash. And in here we use the business key as an input and turn it a hash key. So look at the sample we have in here, student and faculty. For both tables we have hash columns as primary key, which are calculated based on the business keys. Then we have also business key fields as student code and faculty ID, and we have also load date shows when the record is loaded, and the record source that include the origin of data. And when we look at the inside of the data, we also see all this information, but you may notice in here, hash column is written as hash key underscore the student code or faculty ID. Actually, hash key has much more complex structure, but I just want to make it more understandable. That is why I just write the hash key in front of the business key columns in order to make it clear. We have also some standard rules we should always keep in mind when we are considering the hub entity. So let's have a look at them. The hub entity must never contain descriptive information and foreign keys. So to represent the join between the hub concept, we must use the link table. And hubs are parent to all other tables. They must never be children. And also, a hub cannot contain a composite set of multiple business keys that are standalone. For example, account number and invoice number, these two business keys are clearly standalone keys and must be modeled each in their own hub with a link association between them. Additionally, a hub should support at least one satellite to be in existence. Hubs without satellites usually indicates the bad source data, and direct hub-to-hub relationship is not allowed. And finally, business keys and primary keys never change or updated in the hub tables. Okay, now look at the link tables. Link tables joins the hub to other hubs, representing relationships, transactions, and hierarchies between them. So when we look at the table, we see the general structure of link table, and primarily we have the following columns. It contains hash-based primary keys from the connected hubs. In here it is hub1 hash key and hub2 hash key. Then we have a load date that shows when the transaction recorded into the system. And also record source is very similar to hub that includes the origin of the data. The primary key column in the first row, which is the hash key, is calculated a hash key against the business key columns from the contributing hubs. And we have also optional field that is dependent child key, but we are going to discuss about it later. Okay, then see our example, how it is work. We already mentioned that there is a relation between student and faculty which is created over the foreign key column. So the foreign key column indicates us that we need a link table. So we will take the hash-based primary key columns from the relevant hubs, which are the hash key student code and the hash key faculty ID, then we will insert them into the link table as a foreign key. But the link table has its own hash-based primary key. So it is important in here because sometimes it causes confusion. So this field creates a hash value based on each unique combination of student code and faculty ID, which are the business keys from the hubs. So it is not a hash value, which are based on other hash keys from the relevant hubs. So the second statement in here is wrong. So hash key student faculty is our new primary key value and identified each record uniquely in the link table. So we can also see the detailed data on the right table. So we have hash keys from the hub, then we have our own hash key in the linked table based on the primary keys. And again, as I told, the hash algorithm produces more complex structure, but to get a better understanding, I just set the hash key to the beginning of each business key. And on the other hand, the link tables are similar to fact tables in dimensional modeling. So a link can refer to two or more hubs. That is why it can take place as a children table and must have more than one parent table. And the granularity of a link table is identified by the number of parent keys it contains. Again, it is similar to a fact table in a dimensional modeling. And additionally, when a relationship took place in the link table, it can never be updated, deleted, or inserted again. So, and the most critical part is, I would really like you to take attention in here. It creates flexibility and scalability in the data vault modeling, as it allows the model to be created and changed quickly without changing existing structures and the load routines. Or we don't need to worry about whether the relationship is one-to-many or many-to-many, because a link table creates many-to-many relationship in default. So the reason is many-to-many relationship provide benefits on flexibility, granularity, dynamic adaptability, and scalability. Okay, what does it mean? So look at the diagram, you see that we have one-to-many relationship between student and faculty. It was 2 years ago. So it means that student could only study in a single faculty. He can be an engineering student or maybe social sciences. But then the board of school management has decided that a student can have option to get a double major, so he can both study engineering and he can also graduate from a business management. So over time, the rule is changed from one-to-many to many-to-many. So it means that today a faculty can have multiple students and a student can study in more than one faculty at the same time. So these kind of changes on business processes of a company is something that would occur frequently. And do you remember that how we solved many-to-many relationships in the 3NF models? And we use the bridge tables. You may notice in here the bridge tables are very similar to link tables. Both include the many-to-many relationships, and we insert the primary key columns from the parent tables into the bridge or link table. But differently in bridge table, we have option to use either composite key based on student code and faculty ID, or we can create a system generated primary key. But in the link table, we don't base on the composite key columns. We have our own primary key value, but still this value is calculated based on the business keys of the faculty ID and student code. So we have also additional fields like a load date and the record source. But what is the main goal of using many-to-many relationship in linked tables and why it is so important? The reason is data vault targeting to avoid re-engineering effort. When the business rules change or source system change, for example, if the rule change from one-to-many to many-to-many, now student is able to study in more than one faculty, but it was not possible earlier, then we need to handle this change in a way that it should have a little or no impact to existing data sets or existing processes. So using many-to-many relationship in linked tables helps us to handle those changes in our model. Okay, it seems a little bit complicated, but we will be understanding them with some real scenarios in the following sessions. But the important point in here is that structure of linked tables helps us to change or extend our model with less re-engineering effort in a shorter time. And that is the key point to have an agile project approach. Okay, then again we have the golden rules for the linked table. Similar to hub tables, linked tables do not contain the descriptive information. And the link entity must never contain natural business keys or begin date or end date. Because adding business keys to a linked table results as dependency on the business keys during the loading process, and this raises the complexity of the loading routines. So link exists at the lowest granularity. So as we mentioned that this is very similar to fact tables in dimensional modeling. Even though the relationships can be one-to-one or one-to-many or many-to-many in the source system, data vault links can be expressed only many-to-many relationships in order to increase flexibility and scalability. Satellites are optional for link structure except of the hierarchical links. And the last one is, okay, it's not very common and also not recommended, but link tables can be connected to other links as well. Okay, now move on to satellite table. Satellites provide the descriptive information of hubs and links. The primary purpose of satellite is to track the history in the system by capturing all the changes happening in the descriptive data. Therefore, the structure and concept are very much like a type 2 slowly changing dimension. A satellite can be attached to either a hub or a link, but in any case, it should have only one parent table. And furthermore, a parent table, for example a hub, can have one or multiple satellites, but a satellite cannot be parent to any other table. Okay, look at the primary fields that we have in here: the hash key, load date, record source, and the attributes. Let's begin with the hash key. Differently from the hub and link, the satellite does not have its own hash key. The field contains the hash key of the parent table, and a parent table can be a hub or a link depending on which a satellite is attached to. So in the sample in here, the hash key column in the satellite table, which is the hash key student code, is borrowed from the parent faculty hub table. A satellite load date timestamp represents the first time the enterprise data warehouse saw the data. So in a satellite structure, the load date and the parent hash key together form a primary key, and this combination will be helpful also in tracking the historical data. So every time when we load the data vault and have a new records or change records, we insert those records into satellites and give them a new timestamp. For example, in student satellite, the Martin has changed his email address and his hash key value is repeated. So it shows that the hash key is not a unique identifier. Therefore, we need a composite key, both hash key and the load date, in order to make each record unique in here. So when we look at the record source, it represents the origin of the data as similar to hub and the link. Then we have attributes like student name, gender, or email, which they are the descriptive data. We also have an optional field in here, hash difference. We will detail it later, but short to summarize, hash difference will be beneficial to identify the changes in the attributes easily and add the new attributes when there is a change in the satellite. Okay, now move on to golden rules for the satellite tables also. Okay, the first rule is, as we mentioned, that the satellite can have only one parent table. And it must never contain the foreign keys except for the hash key on which relies on the parent hub or link. And the primary key of a satellite is a two-part key consisting hash key of the parent hub or link and combined with the load date timestamp. And on the other hand, when there is a new record or update for a satellite table, existing records are never updated or deleted. So as we mentioned that the main purpose of the satellite is to store the historical data. So when we consider the descriptive information, it is possible to store all descriptive data of attributes in one satellite. But actually this is not our target. Mostly it is suggested to split the data among the different satellites by source, data type, and rate of change. Firstly, it is recommended to split the raw data by the source system. And then if the tables are big, we can further split them by frequency of change. For example, If the unit price of a product is changing more often than a name of the product, then we don't need to keep these attributes together in the same table. Because when the unit price changes, then a new record will be produced each time, and this new record will consist non-changing attributes in a satellite as well. And this results in consumption of additional memory, and this problem can be solved by splitting the data by the rate of change and adding the attributes that change often to one satellite and attributes that do not often change to another satellite. So actually in dimensional modeling we have the similar approach, and we mostly separate attributes to different dimension tables according to their frequency of change. So you see that we practice a couple of modeling strategies from both dimensional modeling and the 3NF model into the data vault approach. So in this session we try to get a general understanding about the data vault basics. It will be a little bit overwhelming and maybe some of you a little bit confused, but please don't give up. We will have a multiple samples and details, and we will get better understanding about them. Then thank you very much for your time.